Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Rosslyn Hill Chapel, a spiritual home for open minds. I'm Roger Mason, chapel member, and your worship assistant for this Unitarian service in Hammersmith, North London. Whoever you are, and wherever you are, this morning we welcome you, online or in person. We've changed to an online service at the last minute because of repairs to our roof, but you're still welcome if you've come in person. We can't offer our usual light refreshments after the service and ask you to leave promptly at the end so that work can resume. I'm delighted to welcome my old friend Ruston to lead our worship this morning, with his wife, Rosslyn. He's a leading historian of our Unitarian movement. If you're watching at home, you can join us for conversation in the virtual side at midday. The Zoom link was sent out in our weekly email update. You can sign up to these emails via the chapel website for more information on all our activities. For the collection, we're an independent registered charity and we rely on your contributions to continue our work. We've resumed collections during the service, but if you contribute in other ways, please don't be shy about passing the basket on. If you wish to contribute by card or mobile phone, our electronic card reader will be available at the exit at the end of the service. And thank you all for the many ways you contribute to our spiritual community through your time, talent, and treasure.
May the light we now kindle inspire us to use our powers, to heal and not to harm, to help and not to hinder, to bless and not to curse, to serve and uphold the spirit of freedom. Amen. Our first hymn today is number 194. In the Green Book, Hymns for Living, and you have it there. It's What Purpose Burns Within Our Hearts by Minot Judson Savage, who was a well-known Unitarian minister in the United States in the last century. 194. Well, we may be limited in numbers this morning because of circumstances, but can we perhaps greet each other if we don't know each other in any way? And even if we do, perhaps something new would come out in that. Well, now, who's going to do? There we are. Well, I shall greet Roger here on the understanding that we've known each other for about 50 to 60 years. Yes, so very long time. Yes. I don't know whether you can add anything to that.
I've known Rosemary even longer.
There we are now, there we are, that Rosemary even longer. That's, more than that we can't say.
No.
Well, I don't know what you're doing.
Obviously.
Yes. Well, thank you very much indeed. Perhaps at home those who can greet each other have done so, but if they can't, they can't. And thank you very much indeed. Shall we now have our reading, which Rosemary is going to deal with us today.
I'm reading a story from a book, 100 Wisdom Stories from Around the World. So I hope you find some wisdom in it. The story is called The Story of Two Sons. And one of my favourite hymns is "The Lord has yet more light and truth to bring forth from his word," because I feel that truth without light, you need the light to see the truth. So this is a story about light. A king had two sons. As he grew older, he wanted to pass on the kingdom to one of these two sons and make him his heir. He assembled all the wise men and women of the land and called his two sons to present themselves. He gave them each 5 pieces of silver and told them, "By the evening, I want you to have filled up this whole hall. What you fill it up with is up to you. You can use the silver pieces if you have to." And the wise folk said, "This is a good task." The older son went off and came to a field where the farm labourers were harvesting sugar beet and putting it through a press. The remainder, after pressing, was discarded. So the older son made an arrangement with the foreman of the labourers to take all the discarded sugar beet and fill up the hall with it. When the task was complete, he gave the foreman the 5 pieces of silver and told his father that the task was done. There would be no need for his younger brother to try. He had filled the hall. His father replied, "There is still time. We will wait." In the meantime, the younger son had gone away and thought about the task. Someone came and told him that his brother had filled the hall. What was he going to do? There wasn't much time left. He realized that the hall had been filled, but he found the foreman who had helped to fill it and asked him to remove it all again. So that's what happened, and he gave the pieces of silver to the foreman for his work. By that time, it was dark, and he came into the hall with a candle in his hand. He carried it into the middle of the hall and lit it. Immediately, the whole hall was filled with light. Light streamed into every corner. And the king said to the younger son, "You shall be my heir. Your brother has spent 5 pieces of silver to fill up the hall with useless rubbish." You used your silver to remove it, and you filled the hall with light. You have filled it with the very thing that my people need above all else.
Let us have now our prayer of names. And I invite you into a time of prayer and meditation. We come together in fellowship each Sunday with hearts full of joy and full of concern. If you are holding someone in your heart this morning, I invite you to say their name aloud in the next few moments of stillness, so that we may hold them all in our prayers. Spirit of life and love, God of our hearts, we give thanks for those who bring us joy, and prayer for the safekeeping of those whom we hold in concern. For all those names, spoken and unspoken, may they be surrounded by the loving kindness we offer them today. Amen. Well, we have a time for giving that is there. If you're at home, please remember to give money to the support of this excellent congregation. I can say that not being a member. So therefore, I invite anything and givings that are there, and this will now be passed round. Our second hymn today reflects my theme of journeys and pilgrimages. 177 in the Sing Your Faith book. To you who would as pilgrims go, with eager steps and hearts aglow, when on the holy city bent, be not deterred from high intent. Our reading today is of a famous start of one of the great core books of the English language, Geoffrey Chaucer, a prologue to the Canterbury Tales. We may not have read this since we were young or at school or other things, but the message of it has come to us so regularly. And this is the opening gift, the opening statement of how the progress will be made. When the sweet showers of April have pierced the drought of March and pierced it to the root, and every vein is bathed in moisture, when quickening force has engendered the flower, and when the west wind too with sweet breath has given life in every wood and field to tender shoots, then it is people long to go on pilgrimage, to take up ship for foreign shores and distant shrines famous in different lands. And most especially from all the shires of England to Canterbury they come, the holy blessed martyr there to seek, who gave his help to them when they were sick. It happened at that season that one day in Southwark, at the Tabard Inn where they stayed, ready to set out on my pilgrimage to Canterbury and pay devout homage, there came at nightfall to the hostelry some 29 in a company, folk of all kinds, met in accidental companionship, for they were pilgrims all. It was to Canterbury that they rode. And then comes the famous story that we must all have heard and seen on television, seen on film. And I always think that's a wonderful phrase, accidental companionship, because that is what we all experience through life. Shall we now join in prayer and meditation? Eternal God, eternal Spirit of time and eternity, help us to look to the past with gratitude and to the future with hope. We remember this day those who have gone before us here, who laboured not for themselves alone, and with a vision of building for the future a world better than they had known. Inspire in us also a like vision, that we may too labour for things beyond ourselves, that our lives may be dedicated to strong purposes and with wider horizons. Make us unafraid of simple dreams and hopes, and release us from cynicism and despair. Teach us to be realistic about our limitations, but never lose hope in our potential to transcend them. May we be helped to realize the significance of these moments together, that it may help us to open our eyes to the blessings of the past, the wonders of the present, and the promise of the future. Grant us courage for today and tomorrow. Let us now be silent for a moment to think on these things. May our spirit always be open to see others as we would see them, to see them living and seeing them go into the future with happiness and hope that we have helped to provide. Amen. Have you ever been on a pilgrimage? That is to start and finish a walking trail that you have set yourselves to undertake, possibly with an aim in view. Perhaps an afternoon walk does not really come into this category, a more casual use of the word. Pilgrimages, of course, have an association in our minds with religious concepts. The opening of the Canterbury Tales brings that into fruition. But the Oxford English Dictionary simply defines pilgrimage is a journey to a place of particular interest or significance, which rules out an easy jaunt. It can be a journey of faith. After all, the Hajj of Islam just means a journey to a place. Although a metaphor, life and faith are faith, the value and significance of an actual walking journey has been popular in some times, but not in others. There's been commonly accepted places to travel to: Rome and Jerusalem, and of course Canterbury. Some have seen the making of a pilgrimage as an attempt to become detached from normal living in order to better hear the voice of the Spirit. So we travel across barren places like deserts. And as I've said, Islam has developed this in the Hajj. Routes are there for pilgrimages to take, and as so often with humankind, profit has come for those who provide accommodation for those pilgrims. And that was the set why there were so many inns on the way to Canterbury. It often Chaucer's journey consists of a variety of individuals, not all of them very holy, and some of them very mercenary, but they set out together from Southwark. Pilgrimages were very common in Europe, but the Protestant Revolution did not encourage it, and they went out of attachment. But then Bunyan came along, and Pilgrim's Progress was really an idea of a pilgrimage, and so it became more common in Protestantism to do that. But the real spur to pilgrimages in modern times is very mercenary. It is the improvement in public transport, particularly in plane flights. Nowadays, we have pilgrimage sites. You've heard of Lourdes in France. Now, Rosemary and I have been there, and that is an experience to see. It is indescribable because it's a mixture of piety and utter commercialism. But somebody with a liberal religious thinking, well, I advise them to go and see Lourdes at its height because it'll give you a different dimension. Pilgrimages in modern times have now become common. Large numbers travel to numerous places or even sites in different parts of the world. And some see it as just a good hike, often with friends. The question arises, can upholders of a liberal religious faith like ourselves undertake pilgrimages with any degree of honesty? Rosemary and I, a few years ago, decided to go on one of our regular holidays to Spain. But the real difference was that we'd follow one of the most famous pilgrimage routes of all, from northern France into Spain, and follow the Camino Frances pilgrimage to St. James de Compostela, from east to west, now commonly called the Camino de Compostela. The pilgrimage is 790 kilometers long, as signs posts make very clear. But don't get the wrong idea. We didn't walk it. We travelled by coach, staying in nice hotels along the way. The walkers with backpacks stayed in hostels designed for them, sited at key sites along the way. It's all set out in a distinct path at the side of the road. So those who've seen it will know that this path, and that's where the pilgrims walk. Those walking obtain a card from an information point where they start, which can be a variety of places in Spain or even farther afield. Indeed, these pilgrimages starts and where to go, and it can be shown by the shell symbol. Now, I think we have got that for those who are here, and you've got it on your orders of worship. The shell, it's all over the place. It means a passageway to this wonderful route to go to St. James de Compostela. At each village or town passed, a card has been given at the start, so that they can stamp it. They've been through that particular place. Well, how did it apply to us on a coach trip? We went to the start there, and the person said, "You're not on a pilgrimage, you're on a holiday." But our tour guide wouldn't have this, and so the tour guide went on insisting that this was right for about 40 minutes, and they gave in the end. And so, because he said that they are on a journey of faith, even so, which is true in its way. And so we had our card stamped as we went along. It's a quite fascinating process. You can't quite all see this, but here is a photocopy of our card. See all those nice little stamps on it? That is stamped each place that we went to. And it's it is, of course, an industry, but it's a wonderful industry and makes us remember the different places. The only bit we walked was the last few kilometres from our hotel at St. James of Compostela to the Cathedral of St. James. That's why it's called St. James. He's supposed to have been buried there. And there's a service at noon each day for those who are making the pilgrimage to recognise its end. They specialise in in having incense on a very long pole from the ceiling, swinging backwards and forwards. It's quite an impressive occasion. So I'm not just talking about a holiday today, however inspiring it was. Something we got out of their journey that I'd like to share with you. I found it of note, because even by the modern transport, it made me think and not reject the idea of pilgrimages as being important, because I think that they are. I did a bit of research on this, and a Methodist minister, Reverend Jane Leach, has written on making this journey in the 21st century. She talks about the spiritual aspects, but she also covers the non-spiritual aspects, which can become spiritual. Many, she points out, walk great distances that may lead them into spiritual change and create a different view of life. She argues that the Camino de Santiago can be a retreat from 24-hour society. Our normal lives may be dominated by the demands of work and lifestyle. Let me quote her here. The routine of pilgrimage establishes something of a counter-ethic. No one can walk in the dark. The hostels rise at 7 a.m. All must be gone by 8 a.m. The next hostel does not open until the late afternoon, and there's a curfew at 10 p.m. There is a time to be alone on the road and a time in the hostel to be together. Life is so much simpler than at home. Being on a pilgrimage dramatically reduces the ability to consume, as I can only buy what I can carry. You relate to people in a different way. You can be tired or thirsty, sometimes lost, sometimes wet through or boiling hot. So you become reliant on the goodwill and hospitality of others you meet. She points out there's an essential interdependence. We saw, and if you have done it as well, many of the pilgrims walking alone and others in groups, but they constantly reformed over the route. And there was the shell motif to encourage them everywhere. There were people from all over the world, and we spoke to several, some seeing it as a wonderful meeting of different types of people, an opportunity to learn and understand not only about yourself, but others as well. A personal spiritual journey is a possibility. To complete all these 790 kilometers at once takes 6 or 7 weeks. Some don't do the whole length. We have met older people who complete a section each year. They start off where they left the previous year. Perhaps I always think that's maybe a bit like life. Those walking find possibly what they don't expect at the end of it. I commend this Camino de Santiago to the young and the not so young. Even when we went in mid-October, there was a large number of people walking then. All ages, up to about the age of 60, we were rather beyond that. Pilgrimages today attract, and there are ones invented all over the world. They even have a pilgrimage route to the same thing from the north of Scotland all the way down across the sea. And there are things to other places. There's even been a Unitarian pilgrimage. A few years ago, it was to Inishmore on the Aran Islands, led by 2 Unitarian ministers, presented as a place for stillness and storms, continuity and change, beauty and barrenness. Pilgrimage is thus a wide meaning, not an activity or idea to be rejected out of hand in the 21st century. Think about it. Matthew Fox, a leading voice in contemporary spirituality, describes pilgrims, I think, in apt terms. Pilgrims are not know-it-all people, but seeking people. They go on pilgrimage to find something they know that they do not have, usually something of the heart. A pilgrim is one who does not have all the answers, not steeped in righteousness, but in humility, with an awareness that we must all be willing to learn together. But I will close with a poem by Alan Horner, written a few years ago. It's called "We Have Said Yes," and gives its more subtle and understanding meaning of what pilgrimage could be. We are at the beginning, the start, the commencement. The first step is taken in our journey of 1,000 miles. Learning takes time and eternity with a 3-mile-an-hour God, but we have begun. We would like to arrive, to settle, to say, this is it then. But the way leads on. Square one is never far away from the square without number. Mocked, not here, not yet, perhaps not ever, as we discern to what, to whom, we have said yes. The pilgrimage along the route, to whom, to what, we have said yes. Amen. We must conclude with that famous hymn, of course, 150 in the Green Book, the hymn of John Bunyan, to all I reckon. Who would true valour see? Let him come hither. I always think that last verse, the start of the last verse, some people don't like it included. Hobgoblins nor foul fiend can daunt his spirit. However, I think that's a very good message, because haven't we met some hobgoblins and foul fiends? The only problem I think with this hymn is that it's all him. It doesn't say anything about women pilgrimages. It's entirely he, which is wrong. So every time you say him, get women in it as well. So it's all of us. So let us sing that famous hymn, 150, the Pilgrim's Hymn. To those of you who came to us today seeking the holy, may the holy go with you. To those who came here seeking to embrace life, may life return your affection. To those of you who came here seeking a better way, may a way be found and the courage to take it step by step. Amen.